Hello, it's Cal. I am back with another video, this time on Season 1, Episode 3 of 911, titled Next of Kin. Next of kin meaning what? Family. This whole episode will be about family. So let's just quickly review where we left off with our main 6 characters of the season. We've got Athena, who is kind of in crisis, both in her marriage with Michael, who she learned is not only gay, but also is having an extramarital affair. We have her also in crisis because her daughter May overdosed on hydrocodone. And that's how last episode ended, on that cliffhanger. We don't know how that's going to go. So Athena in crisis. We have last episode Buck, who's kind of trying to move past his intimacy issues with women and trying to kind of fix his emotional responses to things. He can no longer use sex as a coping mechanism. And we have Abby, who is kind of putting herself out there and trying to do things that make her feel better after a long time of caring for her mother without help, and also being in that kind of caretaker first responder role on the job. Buck and Abby have a bit of a baby romance going on. She asked Buck out over the phone. He said no while he's trying to kind of fix things up. He doesn't want to ruin things with her by moving too fast, but he'd like to remain calling. And then last episode, we didn't get a lot from Chimney, Bobby, or Hen, but we'll get more from all of them this episode, especially Chimney. This is a big Chimney episode. So let's get into that. A standard warning, this episode deals with the aftermath of May's suicide attempt, her overdose. She does discuss her motivations for why she did it, so that will be talked about. There also is like a pretty graphic moment injury with one of our characters, and I'm going to put photos of that on screen. This episode starts with a bouncy house call. They're at a home in the hills, like a nicer house, kind of Hollywood Hills, Beverly Hills. I don't know which hills in Los Angeles. And they're at a children's birthday party. The kids and one adult are bouncing on a bouncy castle. It unlatches from its stakes in the ground and blows over a cliff. So the 118 is called, and they have to rappel down the side of the cliff to save the injured adult and children, and bring them back up the cliffside to get them into the ambulance. That's it. It's pretty simple. It's well filmed and everything. I think it's a cool call. But importantly, we see right away that Bobby is like, okay, Buck and Hen, you'll be rappelling over the cliff. And Chimney's like, hey, like I could also do that. I could also rappel over the cliff. Why don't I get to do any of the fun things? And Bobby's like, well, you're working the winch today. The winch is important. It's fun too. You can see that there's a lot of tension in this little exchange. We can remember that 2 episodes ago, Chimney told Bobby and Hen that he was basically lying to Tatiana, his girlfriend, about cool things that he doesn't actually do on the job. Sometimes he uses Buck stories, sometimes he makes them up to kind of entice her into foreplay, because she's kind of turned on by the adrenaline and the heroics of firefighting. And so obviously Bobby's perspective is that Chim is just asking to do the rope rescue for this purpose, that he's just kind of looking for stories to impress his girlfriend, and that's obviously not a good enough reason to rappel down this head of a cliff. So Bobby isn't like interested in changing his rescue strategy, when he thinks, obviously, for whatever reason, that Buck and Hen are the people to do it. And from, I think, Chim's perspective, not only is there, yes, he does want to use that to tell Tatiana, but I think there's also that insecurity piece of Chim is somebody that like maybe thinks he needs to do extra work to measure up, and thinks that he's being overlooked a lot of the time. I think most of that comes from overlooking his own inherent strengths and good qualities and comparing himself to especially the other men around him. And we'll get more into that with Bobby especially. But so I think that there's friction between them here, because they're both not necessarily understanding why the other person is upset. Anyway, the call goes fine. Everyone's good, but Chim is clearly unhappy. We then cut to Athena, who is responding to May's overdose. May is rushed to the hospital where she's taken like directly to the ICU, and Athena can't really see her, so she is waiting for an update, but it does seem like she survives. At which point Michael arrives. He kind of got the call to meet her at the hospital, but he doesn't know what's going on, so she has to explain it. And you can see that they both blame themselves. Not only does Athena blame herself because it was her painkillers, it was left over from an old dental surgery, and May took them out of the cabinet, which, I mean, I don't think that's Athena's fault. May was definitely old enough to know what she was doing. It wasn't like an accidental, they were in her reach and they shouldn't have been. That part I don't think obviously is Athena's fault at all. And then also for not noticing that May was struggling. And Michael also blames himself again for not noticing, but also because he feels that his coming out maybe prematurely to the children and kind of all that causing the family issues is what caused her to be in such a state to attempt suicide. So they're both really blaming themselves and feeling obviously terrified and awful. I can't even imagine as a parent what that would feel like. They're kind of leaning on each other for support after how angry Athena ended the last episode with Michael. Like, she clearly is able to like put that aside for the moment being so they can both be there for their daughter. They're hugging, they're crying to each other. And just like the worst thing that could happen in that moment for Athena, other than obviously like something happening to May, but like the worst social thing ever happens. Michael's the guy Michael is cheating on her with walks into the waiting room. He obviously drove Michael to the hospital from whatever extramarital thing they were doing together. And he walks into the waiting room fully where Athena can see him to check on Michael. And Athena is like, "Are you kidding me? You just brought the guy that you're sleeping with outside our marriage into the hospital where our daughter is in critical condition, having just attempted suicide." Like, she doesn't say anything. She just kind of gives him like the look. And I think what we kind of see here as important growth from Athena is that in the first episode, she's like very willing to fight with him about this in front of everybody, including the children. In this moment, Athena like really only has the energy for May. So she just kind of walks away. She takes herself out of that situation and doesn't cause a scene. Even though, honest to God, like, I don't know if I'd have the strength not to freak the fuck out right then and there and like be strong for my child. I think I would just lose my goddamn mind. So props to Athena for not absolutely going ballistic on Michael's ass. I would have. Once they're able to go in and see May, she kind of has to play nice with Michael. And I mean, it's not playing. I think she's really just genuinely willing to put their issues to the side right now, which, again, like, definitely a sign of maturity from her. And I think a testament to her as a mother. She's willing to like deal and just ignore a really uncomfortable social situation with her husband to be so they can both be there for May at the same time. Like, May gets both of them. So they go into the room where May's kind of just waking up and doing okay. Like, she's going to be fine. And when May wakes up, like, immediately she says she regrets it and she feels like it was really stupid and she didn't actually want to die. And they kind of like, Michael right away apologizes for it being his fault. And May says that it wasn't, that she's been being bullied at school. And a mean girl basically at her school was telling her to do it, was telling her to kill herself, and that nobody would care if she did. And that she was trying to handle it herself, which I think is a very Athena trait that she had inherited there, and didn't want to kind of talk to her parents about that. So I think we see that not only did she have a lot going on in her personal school life, but then maybe with her parents' shit at home, she didn't feel like she could add to that. So it's not their fault necessarily, and their problems didn't cause it, but their problems maybe did cause her to not be able to confide in them and for them to be too distracted to really notice how much she was struggling. So they both are like, obviously we would care very, very, very much if you died, and we love you so much and we think you're amazing, and this girl's wrong, and like they're committed to helping her get through it, basically. And then unfortunately CPS comes and they're like, because this was a suicide attempt and she's a minor, we do have to keep her on a hold and make sure that it's nothing going on at home that is the reason. And so Michael sort of freaks out about that, you know, May just wants to go home and be with her parents and be with her family, but they have to keep her away from them. He freaks out. Athena understands the law and kind of understands what they have to do, but she's obviously very affected as well because their child has almost just died and they would like to not leave her for even a second, let alone her being on a kind of psychiatric child protective services hold away from them. So it's clearly a very upsetting situation all around. But Athena and Michael do have a pretty important conversation. Athena says to Michael, "Now look, my family is everything to me, and there ain't no trouble from the inside or even the outside that's going to tear it apart. Now we may be buried up to our necks right now, and I may want to slap you with my left hand, but my right hand is holding you and the kids tight." So we can see that she's obviously still very angry with Michael, and her kind of getting over it in this moment for May is not her forgiving him, but she's absolutely willing to like work with him and be a team and co-parent to get May back and make sure May is in like a healthy, good state as much as they can. So we can kind of see that, like, yes, Athena's been struggling and like fighting in front of her kids, and this the marital issues and Michael's betrayal has really taken a toll on her. But when it comes down to it, this is obviously a huge wake up call, and she's going to do whatever she needs to do for her family. So I think that shows Athena's core values as well as her resolve here. And I think it was an unfortunate wake up call that she needed to kind of adjust the way she was reacting to things with her marriage. We cut to Chimney, who is in his apartment cooking for his girlfriend, or at least that's what he says he's doing. He's actually reheating Bobby's cooking. He asked Bobby to make him dinner that he could then reheat and pretend he had cooked for Tatiana, and tells her that he cooked it from scratch, which is just, it's really interesting. Like, we already know that Chimney is somebody who's been lying about the kind of daredevil heroics that he does on calls to make himself sound more attractive to her. Forget the fact that he's a paramedic and he's doing like a lot of the actual life-saving like medical intervention. He is a hero. He's lying about the kind of like cinematic badassery of it to make himself seem like a more desirable man. So then it also, like, reheating this cooking and like passing this cooking off as his own kind of shows that his kind of concept of a perfect desirable man doesn't only necessarily include this. He's also just trying to emulate his own concept of a perfect man, which he obviously sees Bobby as being closer to than himself. And that's a really interesting fact, given that we learned this episode that he doesn't actually know a lot about Bobby outside work. So then he goes on to recount the story of the bouncy house as if he was doing Buck or Hen's job, making it also sound much scarier than it was for Buck or Hen. He also seems like he's really trying to balance kind of this all together. Like, he's a little frantic about keeping this lie together and making it seem really natural when it's really not natural for him. So we can definitely feel his desperation in this scene and his desperation to be perceived by Tatiana in the way he thinks is ideal. So they're eating dinner, and Tatiana says, "You cook, you rappel down cliffs, you're a keeper, Chimney." So this is kind of just, first of all, really bluntly showing us that the only things she likes about him are facades. But even worse, he follows this up by proposing to her. And genuinely, the way he phrases the proposal is, "Will you please marry me?" Oof. Like, it's just super awkward and like secondhand embarrassment inducing to watch. We don't really get the sense that they've been together that long, given that he was explaining how they recently kind of got together 2 episodes ago. So I wouldn't guess that it's been more than maybe like it's I don't even feel like it's been like a year. That's just like my personal interpretation, but we don't actually learn how long it's been, but it doesn't seem like it's been a very long time. Chim was so certain, too, in episode 1 that Tatiana was bored and might move on from him. He said that he should let her go, but can't, So the choice to propose, despite all this, shows a really sad state of Chim's self worth and like this resignation to a lifetime of scrambling to be liked by someone who doesn't really see or know him as his true self. And it kind of shows also like a desperation to lock her down because he thinks that somebody who is like out of his league has settled for him. So this is all just like this really sad state of Chim's psyche. And Tatiana says, not no, but not yes. She says that she's really kind of upset by his proposal and it wasn't fair of him to like spring it on her. He should have asked her about it ahead of time. And she says that she had a fiance before and she cheated on him. And so like all this is just bringing that back up for her. And she asks him for a few days to decide and he says, "Of course, but you can kind of tell on his face that he already knows he's going to be rejected." But he still doesn't even say like, "Hey, like if you're not sure then we shouldn't." He doesn't even like let himself have that dignity. He's very much letting her be in emotional control of the whole situation. So that's a pretty sad state of affairs for poor Chim. We cut to the fire station where Bobby, Buck, and Hen are working. It's kind of downtime. And I feel like it's not like a huge detail, but there is this little scene of Hen and Buck playing video games together and being like very jokey and like platonically, physically affectionate with each other. It's very brother sister. And I love this scene. It's very quick. It's, like not plot relevant at all, but it does kind of show that I think that Buck took her being like really supportive of him seriously and has like worked on that relationship and being close with her and that he appreciates her a lot. And I think it's shown that since like Buck has kind of dropped his cocky act around the people at the 118 that Hen has become pretty close with him too, and they maintain this brother sister dynamic throughout the entirety of the show. They're really close, so I kind of love that this is the first moment that you really see that between them where they're like joking and yeah, it's just very sweet. But then Chim shows up and it's pretty clear that he's angry and like not himself right away. So Buck and Han ask him what's going on and he explains what happened with Tatiana. So he feels like it might be because he's not good looking enough. He's not a good enough catch. He's wouldn't be a good father. Like he's really kind of letting his insecurities of why it might be show rather than, he proposed too quickly or he never actually was his authentic self or she's not a very nice person. So he's very much in this like self-blame spiral. And Bobby kind of, you can see him watching the whole conversation like he's completely judgmental. um, it actually does highlight a sort of a flaw of Bobby's. Not that I ever want to admit to Bobby Nash having a flaw because I would be the first person to lie and say he's flawless, which is just not the moral of the show. But I think it does. So he kind of often forms very strong, usually quite correct opinions about other people's concerning behavior, but sometimes he doesn't address them until it results in a conflict. So we do see this here. So he's listening to the story about Tatiana rejecting Chim, and Bobby just like eventually is just like, well, probably for the best, like under his breath, which obviously elicits a response from Chim. He's like, what do you mean by that? And Bobby's like, nothing, doesn't even matter, it's fine. But Chim keeps pressing him and Chim kind of snaps at him. You're always so quick to comment on everybody's life, but you completely shut down whenever we ask about yours. Why is that? I mean, how long have we worked together, Bobby? I know nothing about you. I've never even met your wife, your kids. You know why? Because all you do is sit there brooding, staring in that little book of yours. So obviously Chim is like out of pocket here. He's very mad and he's definitely extra combative with Bobby. But I think also it shows that this image of Bobby that Chim has constructed in his head is really far from the truth because like Tatiana with Chim doesn't actually know the real Bobby very well. And even still, despite that, I think Chim really resents this perfect image of Bobby he's built up in his head. He has no idea that he's mad at something that doesn't hold up at all, because he doesn't know about Bobby really at all outside of work. And neither do we, the audience, at this point, unlike me, who knows everything about him and thinks about him all the time. But I also think it shows an interesting discrepancy that even though Bobby hasn't been able to help himself from becoming involved in his team's life, like we haven't really seen that with Hen yet, but definitely with Chim and Buck, and he cares about them a lot, he won't let them into his. And that's a double standard that is definitely noticed by Chim in this episode and Hen in later episodes. But eventually, this conflict leads to Bobby kind of bursting and like telling his truth. And he's like, all right, man, you're living a lie. You let her manipulate you. You pretend to be somebody you're not when you're around her, making stories to satisfy some hero fetish of yours. Clearly, while Chim feels like he has to be more like Bobby and Buck to be desirable, Bobby likes who Chim is, but finds that this compulsion to be like other people is completely frustrating and aggravating. But obviously, Chim really isn't like ready to hear this from Bobby, because instead of taking any of this at face value or hearing that his friend doesn't want him to lie about who he is or like reflecting on his own behavior critically, Chim says, you know what? I feel real bad for your wife. I really do. Must be tough living with someone who thinks he's right all the time. Which is just like a really big oof, Chim. Again, this is just totally a projection that Chim is making towards Bobby, despite not knowing anything about his outside life. Like he would not know any details about Bobby's wife or whether or not she's happy or whether or not Bobby is right all the time around her. Like he just doesn't have any of this information. But it shows that he does view Bobby as this perfect guy, which is in the moment very annoying to him, but it's also the reason he's been trying to emulate him. And he obviously kind of resents that he thinks Bobby has the one thing that Chim is wanting, which is this romantic partner. So, big fight between Bobby and Chimney, which watching back makes me ill. It makes me physically ill. I love them so much. They're the best ever. Why would they ever fight with each other? But that, I guess, makes it for interesting character stories, even if it makes me panic like a child of divorce, and those are my dad. Chim storms away from the station and he gets in the car and he's driving and he's angry and he's driving pretty recklessly and he gets into an accident. And the accident is so bad that the truck behind him that crashes into him, it's carrying these like rebar poles, and one of the rebars goes forward through Chim's back windshield. What is the window at the back? That's not the point right now. The point is that Chimney gets a piece of rebar directly through his skull and his brain, which is a really, really striking way for this show to, like, while he's trying to call Tatiana, this happens. So it's like just a really, really striking way for the show to depict that his relationship troubles with Tatiana and the way he's approaching relationships is ruining his life. Like, what a crazy, crazy thing to do. In your third episode, putting a pole of rebar through one of your main characters' heads. The episode after, the daughter of a different main character overdosed on hydrocodone. This show came out swinging so hard for a network procedural. Okay, like this isn't Game of Thrones or The Walking Dead or something. Like this is like a firefighter Grey's Anatomy, and they're doing this in episode 3, which brings our main character near-death experience counter up to 2. May, you had not even a full episode's worth of time at the top. It is now Chim has the honor of being the most recently almost. And in one of the admittedly grossest, most insane ways throughout the whole show, it doesn't actually get much crazier than this, I think, in terms of injuries. The 118 doesn't respond to Chim's accident. The 122 does. A different fire station we'll never talk to again. And they realize that this is a firefighter from the 118, and Chim is like not wanting to be cared for by anyone else but his team, which I think is probably specifically meaning Hen, who would be the other paramedic and is his best friend. So they call Bobby, and Bobby brings the 118 to go help with Chim. And it's very clear right away how much seeing Chim in this position fucks everybody up. Like, they're all very upset, including Bobby. But they do manage to rescue him. They do manage to get him without, like, giving him worse brain damage than he would sustain from this, to the hospital. And I say would sustain from this. This isn't real life, okay? Because I know of somebody that knows someone that did just die like this. Like, you don't survive this. The things that these characters, specifically Chimney, survive, they wouldn't survive. Okay, so we're gonna suspend some disbelief here, and Chimney gets to the hospital and isn't dead. And they have to rush him into brain surgery. At which point, Buck is very much like, I do not want to leave him. Like, we should go in there with him. And Bobby says to Buck, like always, our job ends at the glass doors. Like, he can't go in the hospital, even if it's because they know him. And importantly, like, when Buck's trying to get in to go with them, the doctor's like, well, are you family? And it's very clear at that point that Buck's answer is going to be yes. And Bobby is like, no, like, we don't go past the glass doors. We're firefighters, not family. So that's important. Because remember, what is the theme of the episode? Next of kin, it's family, of course. Obviously, Buck's opinion differs greatly, and we saw that in episode 1 too, where Bobby specifically says to Buck that this isn't a family. So, on the one hand, we have Hen, who is Chim's best friend, and he watching him get a pole through his head. You can imagine that you might not want to watch your best friend in that position. Bobby, who's just had this like huge blowout fight with him, and being like, no, like, we're not family, but clearly shaken as hell and really affected by the thought of him dying. And then Buck being like, oh my god, no family, like, no. So they're all having very different but very emotional, in their own specific way, reactions to this. At 28 minutes through the episode, we finally see Abby. Like, she's been the voice on some 911 calls, but she hasn't actually been in the episode yet, which is crazy because the first 2 episodes featured her so heavily. But anyways, here's Abby. She is having lunch with her mom as well as her brother and his family. Her brother is from out of town. He has a wife and kids, and it does seem like they're close. They're celebrating her mom's birthday, but obviously she's like not very aware, doesn't realize it's her birthday, and she's just not very lucid at all through the whole thing. So after lunch, when they're cleaning up, Abby's brother Matt, he's like, I'm worried about you. I don't think you seem well. And I really do think that we should put mom in like a long-term care facility because she's only going to get worse. And I did get us a spot in this like very good, highly rated residence. And Abby's mad. She's defensive at the suggestion that she's not doing well. And she's also mad that he would do that behind her back. This is a difficult topic, and I don't think there's a right or wrong answer overall. But as somebody that has seen both my parents go through this with a parent, I do think that her brother's right. Not because I think you should dump a family member in a facility or something. That's not it. But I think with a disease like Alzheimer's, which again, like I have seen family go through this. Like, I did watch that kill my grandmother when I was 15. And my other grandmother is really suffering with it right now. It is, I think, dangerous to not have those extra levels of care and security that a long-term care facility can provide. So I do take the position when I'm analyzing this episode that I think that Abby's brother is right. And the reasons that Abby is so adamantly against the care facility are what I'm like looking at and reading into her character, not the actual debate, because I do think she's wrong. Anyways, that's where I'm coming from. People can feel free to disagree with me. Maybe you've had opposite experience, but that's where I'm coming from. I think that despite the caregiver role making her sort of miserable and trapped in her life, admitting that she feels the need for an out would make her feel like selfish or some sort of failure. Matt says that she's kind of acting like a saint and that he's very appreciative of her, but she doesn't have to do this. And she says that I'm not a saint, I'm a daughter. So we can see that she feels a duty to what she's doing. And it kind of leaves the impression that she and her mother did have a very good relationship before she got sick. And there's part of her reasoning is that. And Matt asks her, like, okay, like you're getting by, you're doing fine, but are you living? And I think that despite Abby dismissing this question, it does stick with her for the rest of the season. And we'll explore that later. But he's put up a really good point. Like, you're functioning, you're surviving, but are you really like living and enjoying your life? We cut back to the fire station and we see that everybody's kind of dealing with Chim being in surgery and in critical care in different ways. Buck is very much like stuck on it, like pacing around, asking questions. He keeps bringing it up. Hen has become like very irritated and very grumpy with everything, and she's trying to distract herself. But it's clear that this is taking a really big emotional effect on both of them. And Bobby tells them that there was a complication with Chim's surgery, and he has now been placed in a medically induced coma to kind of reduce the swelling in his brain following the removal of the rebar rod. So they don't know if he'll wake up. They don't know what condition he will be in if he wakes up, but he did survive surgery. I don't know if you can hear, but a literal fire siren just passed by my house. That's crazy timing. The next call they go on is actually like really crazy. It's a guy like transferring migrants over the Mexico border into California, but then like the truck breaks down and they overheat, and so he kind of just like abandons them and they're all kind of boiling in there until the 118 saves them. It's crazy. But Hen kind of loses her shit when they find the driver and uh really gets very angry with him and chases him down. And I think it's obviously very justified, and you agree with her absolutely. However, it's showing that she's just really affected by Chim being unwell and in critical condition, and it's rendering her like unable to really like professionally handle these situations. Which I think is like an important insight into Hen and Chim's relationship, because we don't really see much of Hen in these first few episodes, like I've complained about already. So this insight that she loves him this much and like that this is like really, really difficult for her does show the strength of their friendship, which I think is one of the highlights of the show overall, is like how devoted of friends they are to each other. But on top of that, we also see Buck noticing how upset she is, and during this time, Abby calls him on the job once again. Don't worry, everybody's already taken care of, so it's not like he's taking the call to like actively distract himself from helping people. It's kind of wrapping up, but still he does answer the call on the job, which I'll keep pointing out because it keeps being crazy to me. And she runs over the situation with her mom and the home and being unsure whether or not she's making the right choice. And Buck says, look, I don't know a lot, but if there's one thing I've learned over the past 24 hours, the only thing that matters is family. Which, once again, what is the theme of the episode? Next of kin, family. Woohoo! This kind of isn't an answer to whether or not Abby should put her mother in a care facility, but Abby does take it as an answer. She does say, "You're so right. I'm not going to do it," and then that's how they end the call. On top of that, it kind of does show that like Buck at the very beginning of the season in episode 1, when he was like, I don't have anything outside this job, I think he's realizing that that is not true. If he has this unit of people, that he does have a family within them. Obviously that's still within the confines of the job, but he's realizing that these relationships mean more to him than just the job role. So clearly the job is more about being a hero and a badass. We did learn that last episode, but he's also seeing that here in like the fear of losing Chimney. The next scene we get is absolutely fucking crazy. I think before this point you could see that while Tatiana's shallow and obviously like not a great partner, she hasn't really done anything terribly wrong other than maybe her reaction to the proposal. Really the blame so far has laid with Chim for being the one lying to her about who he is. Whether or not, she did something to cause that, he still chose to do it. So we don't really get an full picture of just how terrible Tatiana is until this scene. Bobby goes to Chim's apartment where he knows Tatiana is, and he asks her to go to the hospital where Chim is about to be brought out of the coma. And she's just like, no. Like, okay, I just need to pull up the script and just like read this whole thing because it's genuinely one of the craziest social situations of the season. So Bobby says, they're bringing him out of his coma now. It would be good if you were there. And then Tatiana says, he asked me to marry him. It's not right, putting me in that kind of situation. Either I say yes or I'm some kind of monster. Bobby says, you don't have to say yes. You just have to come hold his hand. This is not about love. It's about decency. And so Tatiana replies, that's my point. Anything I do now isn't being Florence Nightingale makes me look like some kind of jerk. So I hold his hand when he wakes up. Then it's stay with him until he's out of the hospital. And then it's you can't break up with him until he can walk or talk again. And that's assuming he ever can. And you want me to just play like I'm in love for how long? A month? A year? I'm not a bad person. I'm just not in love with him. Which is just crazy because it was literally just, please come sit by your boyfriend's bedside as he wakes up from a coma. That was the only ask. So Bobby replies, my friend is coming out of a medically induced coma. I don't know if he'll ever fully wake up. And if he does, I don't know if he's going to be able to talk or see or hear or even remember who I am. I'm not asking you to love him or marry him, and I'm not judging you for your feelings. I'm not. I'm just saying he loves you, misguided as he may be. And the only two things I can think of to help him are to pray and to hope that if you're with him, he'll feel that love for you and it will give him a reason to fight his way back to us. And she says she can't. She doesn't do it. She doesn't come to the hospital, effectively breaking up with Chimney, like through Bobby as a proxy while he's in a medically induced coma. Holy shit. Holy shit. I don't like super hard bashing on characters' partners. Like if it's not the ship I ship, most of the time I'm not gonna shit really hard on their other partner or whatever. Tatiana can go to hell. Like she can go to hell. She's terrible. That's terrible. She's in jail this episode. Michael's in jail this episode for bringing his affair to the hospital. Like really just everybody's romantic partners are messing it up this episode. It's not good. It's not good. Also, I think that it's really important to highlight that Bobby says he'll feel that love for you and it will give him a reason to fight his way back to us. I just think that's important to hang on to, so hold on to that until the end of the episode. We move to Abby, and she has a really quick conversation with Carla about whether or not to put her mom in the home and that she's decided not to. She says that in terms of taking care of her mom, I thought, as long as my mom is still here, I want her to be with me. It's not like I think she's being selfish or like trying to prevent her mom from having the best care. I do think she thinks that she's giving her mom really good care and she's not doing a bad job by any means, but I do think a lot of Abby's reasoning and motives for not giving her mom the opportunity to go into like a specialized dementia care facility are a little inherently selfish. Like not only does she say that she's like paralyzed with guilt at the thought of doing it, she says that to Buck. And I think in this case, guilt is sort of a selfish emotion because she'll have to like think about like her own response to doing that. I also think that like holding on to being that caregiver role does allow her to not think too much about her future, which is something I think that like we've seen that she's insecure about being single at her age and like not necessarily really loving her job. So I think that it allows her to not think about that future that's really scary because she's unsatisfied. So I do think where she's not like actively or consciously making a selfish choice. She thinks she's making the right choice because she loves her mom and she's devoted to her. I do think there are other reasons why maybe she's avoiding putting her mom in like a better, more full-time care. And we will see throughout the season that this does have consequences. Then we get our last glimpse of Athena for the episode. That was our last glimpse of Abby. Here's our last glimpse of Athena. Even though it was Michael that had a way more reactive response to CPS getting involved with May, and Athena was the calm one, we can kind of see that she's flipped the script now, what is a little bit like maybe a day or two later. And she is last seen in a police cruiser outside May's school, comparing the children she sees walking out of the school to the yearbook photo of the girl that told May to kill herself. Concerning. Understandable, but concerning. So we're a little worried about Athena and what she might get up to next episode. And we're also like, okay, so that thing where you said that when you take the uniform off, you're no longer at work and you can let it all go, and that they're separate, it's not true. Like, it's really proving less true every episode, actually. Then, in our final scene of the episode, Buck, Bobby, and Hen go to the hospital as Chim is being taken out of the coma in place of Tatiana. And they sit there and Bobby holds his hand and Buck is like saying all these encouraging things to him, like all the cool jobs he can have once he gets back to work. And Hen is like, oh my God, Buck, like, no, he can't do those. Like, he's just had a pull through his head. Like, he's absolutely not doing those jobs. And this, like, presence from Bobby and the, like, bickering encouragement between Hen and Buck, that does wake Chim up. He does have a response to that. It's a very weak response, but he gives Buck like a thumbs up, like, yes, I can do the rope rescue. It's really like, obviously they're all very emotional about this and they're all very happy Chim is alive and can hear them and understand them and has like cognitive function. And then the episode ends when Hen is like, hey, like, I tried to call your parents in Seoul, but there's a 16-hour time difference. I couldn't reach them. We'll learn a lot more about his parents later, so don't worry, it's not a complete loss. But then Bobby is like, don't worry, his family's right here. Bobby acknowledging the 118 as family after all this time, 3 episodes. After all this time, we rejoice. He finally got there. We can see that, like, the fear of losing Chimney and the, like, relief in getting him back and him waking up really caused Bobby to step outside the walls that he's built for himself, that we will explore in later episodes, and that Buck was right all along. They are family. Buck is not often right above Bobby. That's not something I'm going to say a lot, but this time he was absolutely right. Also important to mention that Bobby had said, like, he felt that if somebody Chim loved was there, it would help kind of pull him up out of his coma and like give him a reason to fight to wake up and come back to them. And because Bobby, Buck, and Hen were all there, he had that love, he had that reason to fight his way back. So I think that's particularly emotional. So that's it. That is the end of episode 3, Next of Kin. So let's do our little wrap up of where we are. This episode, Abby, kind of a very brief C plot, determining whether or not she wanted to put her mom in a long-term care facility for, like, specifically for dementia care. Really never seemed like she actually was highly considering doing it, and she comes to the conclusion that she didn't. So not really a lot of, like, character progress there, but we get some insight into why, I guess. Athena and Michael put their differences aside to be present for May in the aftermath of her overdose. And despite Michael's absolutely foul behavior in bringing his affair to the hospital, they, like, commit to leaning on each other in this time of crisis for their daughter. Except Athena may now be stalking the bully that told May to kill herself. So not great. Chim, poor guy. The consequences of his bad relationship had a way more disastrous outcome than most would ever expect. Rebar through the skull, coma, huge blowout fight with Bobby before that, and being dumped while he's in that coma. Hen, Bobby, Buck, all just really reeling from the emotional trauma of their dear friend being nearly killed, and especially Bobby, that clearly pushes him a little bit outside his usual closed off demeanor. So that's it. That's season 1, episode 3, Next of Kin. And I'm really, really excited because the next episode is actually my favorite in the season. So I am looking forward to talking about it. But I had a lot of fun with this one too. I think it's a great episode. Okay, that's it. Bye.